A week ago today, we were presenting to the Parent Faculty Association and on an on a subset of this topic, and it was way more scary. So it's nice to be in a room of colleagues and friends. I had to wear my serious dress last week, and it's a very and they have these, if you know our school at all, the PFA luncheons are up on the President's Lanai, and it's very proper. And the PFA parents are all cool because they're all with friends, and then Bennett and I were just shaking in our boots. So anyway, thanks for joining us today. I am Maureen McLeod. I am a co-chair of what we call Team S.E.L in the Academy of Punahou School in Honolulu, Hawaii. The academy in our definition is the grades 9 through 12, so the junior school is K-8, and then academy is 9-12. I've been in that position since August the 15th, and my partner in crime is Bennett Valencia.
Hi.
Do you want to say a bit about you? And then
Yeah, I'm Bennett Valencia. I am a counselor, a teacher, a behavior analyst. I've worked in the public and private sector for about 10, 12 years, and I've been at Punahou for 3, and with Mo for the past 2 months. Well, officially 2 months, yeah. And Mo was an English teacher for the last 20
years. Let's not go there. So our presentation today is the beginning of our journey to place social, emotional, and ethical learning at the center of our academy curriculum. That's kind of the official title because you have to do that when you're going into a program. We see our work as shifting the culture, changing minds, changing hearts, finding our way. We literally have been in the job since August the 15th. We were appointed last December, which is the way Punahou does things. So we had kind of 6 months to go, oh my God, what did we do? Why are we doing this? But then we've been in position since August the 15th. And so what we're sharing with you today is the beginnings of our research and a bit about the path that we've taken. And then what we intend to do kind of is invite your thoughts and ideas, because we suspect if you're here, you're at some point on a similar journey as we are. So schools of the future. The first thing we were thinking about, one of the questions that Bennett and I have been exploring since last winter is really that thing that colleges do quite often, which is portrait of a graduate, but we're not looking at that full graduate. We're saying, what does our Punahou graduate as a human being look like? And so that's kind of where our musings started and our conversation started last winter. And we, of course, like many of you, have drawn on the work of the CASEL Consortium. We're really comfortable with both the research they've done in making the case for S.E.L. and its integration. And so we've got just a couple of slides, we're sure that you've done all the research, but the 2 or 3 things that resonated with us about this was that CASEL's really made the case, especially as an independent school. I know public schools are also under funding pressures, but as an independent school, every penny counts. And so trying to take energy away from or shift energy from an academic subject to what they call soft skills is really a hard case to make. So if you haven't yet discovered the CASEL website, we would strongly recommend that you immerse yourself. They've got tons of, so the quotes here are from their 2015 high school manual, where they argue about the centrality of emotions and learning, the centrality of emotions in the place of learning. And then the EAB report is actually a consultant that many independent schools use, and as well as colleges, to talk about. They're a research organization, and they look at success in high school, success in college, success in life after college, and they've got tons and tons of research. And the part that we particularly liked about their most recent report was, it was actually a study of student stress. And they said, obviously, student stress is mitigated when there are robust S.E.L. programs in a K-12 learning environment. And the 3 factors that they identified as essential to success is that any S.E.L. program that is crafted or purchased is based on a robust set of evidence-based research. And again, we chose CASEL as our framework. And then also the thinking of the school leadership and the faculty is that SEL skill building is as important as academic skill building. And then the third is that it exists in a community and a school culture that is fully supportive and an ongoing, in an ongoing fashion reinforces the value of SEL as a core part of student learning. This Aspen Institute study from 2017 was actually a neuroscience study, and it's also on the CASEL website. And we particularly liked the fact in this particular report where it talked about the 5 domains of human development, social, emotional, cognitive, linguistic, and academic, are so deeply interwoven that it actually doesn't make any sense to parse them out, and that you impede learning and understanding. And this is an excerpt of the quote, but if you read the whole section, it talks about how deficiency in one of the 5 modes actually negatively impacts ability to develop in others. So it's like that. I was thinking about the hula hoop activity where everything has to be balanced, you know. But so essentially that emotion and cognition work together to make learning and to have it cemented. So clearly speaking to the choir, but I think it's important. One of the things that we will talk a bit more about later is the importance of making the case in your community, that when you find yourself surrounded by like-minded people, it's kind of like it seems obvious to us, but even some of our well-meaning colleagues are like, well, yeah, I get it, but we just don't have the energy or the time or the budget to support it, so you guys just do it in your department. And then another castle, sorry. So what does this mean for us? The case that we've been making this fall with our colleagues is that emotions matter because they affect how and the degree to which people learn, that social emotional learning is a necessary element for successful academic learning, not just a successful life, and that schools and school settings have an important role. And Bennett's going to speak more about that in a minute, about where we are in our learning journey and what matters. So last fall, like many schools, we started looking at what was out there in the marketplace. It's obviously a lot easier to purchase something. Some of the programs that we looked at were the Yale Ruler, which is the Emotions Matter research, Responsive Classroom, which is more of a junior school program, but we work closely with our K-8 partners, so we were thinking if they adopted something, we might be able to piggyback and borrow from them. We looked at the Wayfinder program being developed at Stanford. We looked at the tribes learning community because sense of place is super important to us in Hawaii. And I actually had supper last night with there was a castle dinner here, and I was with a woman from Kauai who was talking about it's a charter school and an immersion school, and she was saying how they actually have borrowed some of they call tribes like a mainland program, but they said that they were able to adapt some of it by infusing more of the value of family, the value of place, the value of extended family in Ohana and Kuleana. So there are programs that exist, but anyone who knows Punahou knows that we're not really good at buying stuff and leaving it as it is. We tinker a lot. So we liked the elements that we liked for all of those. And so the junior school is actually adopting Responsive Classroom for some of its grades. We're working towards adopting, Kathleen, don't tell anybody.
I'm taking notes.
Okay, she's from Punahou. We're looking at adopting the Ruler program K-12 because it is such a good wellness program for faculty that Bennett and I have talked about it, and we said if it gets no further than our academic colleagues and never ever officially works its way into the classroom, it will still be a huge win for the school. We like the Mind Up, but I wonder if it's part because I'm a super big Goldie Hawn fan, and that's from her. So they're really good mindfulness stuff, but it's also Goldie Hawn's foundation, and I feel like she's brilliant. So I thought that's also something I enjoy. No bias there. But the problem we have with adopting a program is we have a second E. So our program is not just SEL. That second E is ethical. And Bennett's going to share with you some of his thinking on, or our thinking on that.
Yeah, sure. So why the second E? Ethics, ethical. What does it mean to be ethical? So I did what I usually do when I first start a project is Google it. I looked it up. Not that I don't know what it means, but right, it's from the Greek word ethos, and it means character. And how do we develop that? How do we build that? And how do we, what is our role in saying what, in developing morals with our students? Are we supposed to say what's right and what's wrong? And what is the school's responsibility with that? So I'm actually going to have you guys talk about that a little bit and maybe help us out, because this is a pretty big question. If you could talk to your neighbor and discuss what behaving ethically means to you. What do you think that is for students? If you saw them behaving ethically, what would they be doing?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, let's try this thing
Oh,
out.
yeah.
Yeah, let's try this thing out. Can we get some, maybe some snippets or shares that people would want?
Kathleen she'll catch the ball. Okay.
Okay.
Throw it.
Okay.
Talk now? Yeah. Okay. Have you all seen the ball?
So this
I'm
blue
crazy
ball,
about this.
Kathleen is going to toss to somebody after she's pow.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it far, too. So am I supposed to answer this?
Yeah,
What you said?
what are some of your thoughts? Yeah.
We kind of came up with to behave ethically, that ideally you could behave ethically based just certainly straight on compliance, but the hope would be that, or your actions can look ethical based on compliance, but really if you were going to behave ethically, it would have to be really based on empathy and a feeling of your impact on others, society, and our earth. Okay, who wants to catch? You can throw it far. Has anyone tried this? You? Oh yeah. Are you ready? Right there. Yeah. I'm not great. I'm not great. So I'm marketing this for these.
Awesome.
Nice, Kathleen.
No. Well, I got to have a conversation with Layla here, and I think some of the words that sprung to her mind, first of all, values. Ethics, I think, spring from internal values. So sort of the idea that you do something alone, whether or not someone's watching you, is a little bit, because their values would be the same. We talked a little bit about how that could be different. Potentially, people come from different values. They have different, maybe paradoxical things that they hold in mind. So ethical behavior for us would be that people could still express that and not kind of be penalized for it. And then we thought about something around citizenship, that it's part of being a collective. So that allows you to make sense of others and to participate meaningfully with others. I don't know if you'd add anything later.
Okay. We talked a little bit about that paradox that sometimes there are two opposing values, and that it's really important to be able to identify those values. So let's say you're talking about community versus independence, right? And those are both important values, so to be able to identify that with your students and then be able to see where you get those values from and why you're making the decisions you're making. Hi, Brenton. Oh, sorry. Oh, is this really for me? We didn't even have a conversation. Sorry.
I'm sorry, what is your name? Kale? Kale had I think a brilliant comment to it. She talked a bit about, we were kind of pondering the role of what a teacher's role would be in developing ethical and moral behavior. And she said, well, the teacher has to reflect first on their own morals and their own values, and then see if that connection, or see what connection is made, or if they do line up with whatever school or organization that you are working for. And if they are different, why are they different? So those are really great questions, really big questions that we are also trying to answer. And if you could, for the next one, this one's kind of, I feel like this one's a little tricky.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah. So if you could discuss the assumptions your school makes about their students' backgrounds, value sets, and understandings. If family, society, government, friends are creating and influencing values and morals and ethics, what kind of assumptions are we making about our own students, which will help us better understand how we can help prepare them for what is expected of them. So if you could have a conversation about that.
When you teach anywhere, you make certain assumptions. I was mentioning mistakes about assuming even kids' parents were alive. Assumptions. But as far as ethically, stray away from religion, stray away from. I shouldn't say stray away from it, but consider it. People's parents who are in prison, unwed mothers, even drug use in the home. To stigmatize any of that in a negative way, you could be speaking directly to somebody's, even military use. There's a lot of hunting, and yeah, that's all. A lot of ethically things. So I was mentioning in our discussions, we go the broad general ones that are considered ethic, like finding somebody's wallet, what would you do? Certain things like that. That's all. Would anybody like to catch the ball or have it roll to them? Okay.
Does anyone on this side have a share? Okay, yay. Okay, so what we were talking about was the assumptions question, and I brought up something personally for myself. The subtext there that talks about examples of public versus charter versus independent schools, and being here the past 2 days, and I was at dinner last night too, where we were at a round table of people from really different schools and really different experiences, and my husband happens to teach in a private school as well, and I'm in a public school, so I started to think about ethics in terms of ethical thinking. Like, we put kind of even ourselves as educators and students in little boxes. And so if you're at this public school or you're at this charter school, you have these advantages or whatever. Or if you're at this public school, you might have these disadvantages. And so I'm wondering about how that affects my own personal bias. Like, when I'm a counselor, so when I'm advocating, I should probably think about my ethical thinking first and see where I'm at. And then I have to do that, and I know, like, even when I'm having a dinner conversation with my husband, I'm a little uncomfortable because we are putting even ourselves in boxes, and so we're doing that with the students. So that's just something that I thought
about. So Mo and I, and we thought about this question as well, and we make assumptions about our students as well. One of their assumptions were, they're going to learn S.E.L. and S.E.E.L. As they get older, as they go through the different courses, as they go through the different grades. They're going to learn it implicitly through these different curriculums that they're being offered. But why are they continuing to not use why are they continuing to gather demerits? Why are they continuing to not treat each other with empathy or compassion? Why are they continuing to use technology in an irresponsible way? Why are they continuing to do these actions that a lot of us would consider unethical or are not responsible? What is happening? And that's really why we are in the position we are today, because it is identified as a challenge for us. And I think if you could look across all schools, it's a challenge for all teenage students. And having a system and an approach to help guide them through the different steps that they need to take in order to be able to sit down and ponder that question. Okay, I found a wallet. What should I do with it? What are the impacts of my actions? What should I do? Why am I thinking that way? And where does it come from? I think those are super important questions. So thankfully, our leader, Dr. Scott, was posed this sort of question in 2013. What should a Punahou graduate, what skill set should a Punahou graduate possess, and what would set them apart? And in his mind, it would be something that would provide them with a sense of place, a sense of purpose, a commitment to pay it forward, a willingness to identify and pursue personal passions, and a desire to be part of something bigger. And for us, we really honed in on these specific aims, to have a global perspective, to think more about just yourself, but about the impact it can have locally and globally. And you have a responsibility not only to do that, but to show empathy and compassion while thinking about it. Not only to identify different cultures that can create different values, but to reach across the aisle and show that you understand where those come from and use them to connect with others, not to I guess I don't want to say build a wall, not to yeah. So embrace diversity, use moral reasoning, but is that enough? I feel, what was important was to be able to navigate through these situations, but to act, but to do something about it. And to be an upstander, not just a bystander. If you see something going on, you have responsibility as a community member to do something. And engage in personal leadership, and be an engaged citizen. Be informed about what's going on in the world and what's going on around you. And so how do we do that? Well, we looked to CASEL, really. We took a look at different S.E.L. programs like Tribe. There's another S.E.L. called Parent. There's another one called, well, there's a whole bunch of them. But when we did our research, CASEL was the one that really shined through. And to be honest, all of the S.E.L. programs really focused on these skill sets, all these 5 skill sets. So self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And what CASEL also did is break them down into defined units. And we saw that ethical responsibility came under responsible decision-making. So once we found this sort of program, we wanted to take a look at what will come out of it if we use it, right? And so if you take anything away from today, this is really it. This really helped frame what we are trying to do, and we'll get into specifics about the actual steps we've taken at Punahou to help accomplish these. But to create a program that is explicit in social emotional learning, that is dedicated time and teachers that teach explicitly to that. So, and another way would be implicit, right? To have these sort of lessons in terms of resilience, in terms of empathy and compassion, built into chemistry class, built into math class. So have teachers buy into these important skill sets, right? Just as important as the content, right? And take a look at our organization and our culture and what we are doing to either support it, these skills, or to take away from it. And the short-term outcomes are really those 5 skill sets that we took a look at, and improved attitudes for yourself and others, a supportive and engaging and participatory learning environment, and the long-term outcomes are things that we are really excited about. Positive social behavior, fewer conduct problems, less emotional distress, and improved academic performance. So how do we do this at Punahou, right? So this is the broad recipe, right? Each organization or each school has their own resources, their own culture, their own values. So how are we doing it?
Okay. I think Bennett's right. If you do nothing other than from this presentation, or gain nothing from this presentation, this is the slide you want. It's also on the CASEL website, and it really is kind of the blueprint. I remember when I was at Schools of the Future 3 years ago, somebody from the CASEL organization was presenting on what the CASEL wheel was, what its competencies were, how you measured them, and I was like, oh, we should buy that. But I was very disappointed to learn that CASEL is in fact not a program. It's like a template or a framework. And so, and Bennett and I spent, like, we've got the wheel up in our offices, we've got the wheel in all of our faculty members. There are 8 people in our department, and everybody has the wheel in their office. And we've been retrofitting lessons we're teaching currently to the wheel. But it was really when we started thinking about this sort of 3-step process, short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals, as well as the evidence, like the behavior change, that we really started to appreciate how CASEL can work well for a school in terms of guiding it. So we see CASEL as kind of our litmus test. And so although our students and our faculty colleagues are hearing language that is taken from the aims of a Punahou education, which is kind of our public language, Bennett and I, when we're designing things and imagining what our department curriculum will look like, we're testing it constantly against whether it resonates with the CASEL wheel. And we just did a retreat with our department on the 26th of October, and we said that we were actually working on saying, okay, so what do the competencies look like in our school based on, so we've got our like personal leadership, and then we test it against the Castle one, and then we kind of fine tune it for our own place so that we can do our own assessment and our own measures. Basically then the opportunity is we've been asked to create a multimodal social, emotional, and ethical learning program, which requires us to figure out what the research is, figure out what works in our organizational context, and then also to build stakeholder support. I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that we were at the PFA meeting, and some people were super nice, like, thanks so much for doing this for our children. And then there was one gentleman who was like, what are your evidence outcomes, and how do you guarantee that the investment is worth the reward? And it was like, as I say, I was quaking in my boots, so it's nice to be with you today. And I should say, for the people, many people here probably know a lot about Punahou, but a couple things that are just maybe helpful before we move into the next phase is, we have 3,750 students. Our campus is 76 acres, so we're not as big as Kamehameha Kapalama, but I think we are the largest single campus school in the country. We're the oldest west of the Mississippi. It's a competitive entry school, but Dr. Scott, our president, believes very much that Punahou should represent the diverse community it lives in. And so he also has a, if you can get in, we'll find a way to pay for you. So we've got, I've been at Punahou for 15 years, and I've really noticed, happily, an increase in diversity among the student body from both a socioeconomic perspective, but as well as a culturally and linguistic perspective. Bennett was saying I teach, I'm formerly an English teacher. Typically, I help about 50 kids with their college essays every year, and what shocked me last fall, which I think impelled me to head this direction with Bennett, is that 4 of the 50 kids I worked with last fall so they were seniors last year. 4 of them were not living with custodial parents, like any biological family member, and each of them had ended, one girl was from Korea, and when she got into Punahou, her mom sent her to live with a cousin. And then there was a boy from Kauai who was a golfer who didn't live with anybody. He lived with a family friend. There was a girl whose family moved to the mainland because the dad got transferred. So they were living with she was living with a neighbor. So these are people who are like 16, 17, 18 years old that for the privilege of attending this school are missing all of the social family support systems that I recognize that not every family is perfect or ideal, but at least it's a family. And there's so much research that says that, you know, I mean, we all know it, that how important the family connection is and how important family stability is and how important supporting the families are. So I think this work is desperately needed in all of our schools, even the ones that seemingly have everything. But there's a lot of pressure. So this is our journey so far. So separately, Bennett's been at Punahou 4 years, and this is my 15th. But we each were working on this as a kind of a passion project separately, and we didn't get partnered up until December. But in 2016, the WASC-SEL study called Punahou. It had 4 major initiatives that it recommended, and they didn't rank them in order. But one of the 4 was developing a coherent K-12 S.E.L. program for the school. At that time, we were both expressing interest in looking at how we care for kids beyond the curriculum. So separately, we visited schools on the East Coast and West Coast, identifying specific independent schools that were doing S.E.L. well, or at least were headed the same path with the same kinds of questions that we had, embracing the ethical part of it as well. Since we were appointed in December, we have done a ton of training. Like, we didn't see our families all summer, it felt like. We are a Challenge Success School. We are a founding member of the Mastery Transcript Consortium, so we're redesigning everything, moving away from A through F towards competency assessment and project-based learning, which is freaking everybody out. Bennett and I have both done the Meaningful Advisories training, which is fantastic. It's 2 days, it's super inexpensive, and it's hosted by the Center for Spiritual and Ethical Education. So if you're not a member, I would encourage you to look at those sites, consider membership. We attended the St. Andrew's Episcopal Center for Teaching and Learning this past summer, where we did research on, or we learned about how the brain's role in emotions and learning, and it was we had to dissect a sheep's brain. It was really gross, but Bennett did it for our table, so I was happy. Sorry, we recommend it. We both have done ruler training. We love ruler. And we also did Stanley King training, which is listening for non-counselors. Highly recommend that one as well. And and we're actually bringing a mini Stanley King course to our school, because in the academy, we have 80 advisory teachers, and then there's like another 60 in the junior school. So it's just like the numbers are unbelievable. Since school started this fall, we also have to do our own research, because we feel it's important to understand what makes sense in our context. So we finished interviewing and focus grouping with the teachers and the alumni, and we're just in the process of doing focus groups with our students. And then after the winter break, we're going to do focus groups and surveys with our parents. And then the last thing, and this is exciting, is we started prototyping different things that make sense for us with the freshman advisory class. So some of the things that make early sense we're testing in 9th grade, because being a big school does give it lots of resources, but being a big school also makes lead time an essential part of the mix. We're not nimble. So Bennett mentioned that we're creating a multifaceted social, emotional, and ethical learning program, and we visited S.E.L school in September, and we really liked their 6-second approach, which is another S.E.L one that we've looked at. But what we really liked about it was the way they parsed out their audiences. And so they talk about implicit, integrated, and explicit curriculum. And so in our case, well, we kind of talked about all three. So the implicit is probably the hardest one to do, because that's building a culture of support. That's actually putting into your teacher contracts. The S.E.L school said that they don't hire someone by simply looking at their academic skill. They have to look at the S.E.L lens with which they approach their work. And if you're a strong math teacher but you don't have S.E.L strength, you don't get the position, because they know the value of having a shared culture and the shared understanding. So that's core to they're also a brand new school, by the way, so they're able to start, like Bennett and I have colleagues that have been at Punahou for 40 years and are loving and caring teachers, but they were clearly hired for their talent in a particular subject area. The integrated part we see as being the advisory program, and our thinking currently with our advisory teachers, because they were hired for subject matter expertise and not S.E.L lens, is that we are focusing on community building with our advisory teachers, saying we want kids to be welcome, known, and safe. We want teachers and one of the measures we're using for this year is, what do you know about a kid beyond him as a student or her as a student? So nothing creepy, just like, does he have a sibling? Do they play a sport? Do they play, what's their favorite band? Do they have a pet? Just something, because there's so much research that says if you know a kid as a person, that simple statement makes a difference. Like, simply knowing kid as a person increases, and I wish I remember the statistic, but it increases his or her likelihood of success even in subjects they're not strong at, because they're more willing to try. They're more willing to, it makes a difference if someone believes in you. And then the explicit will be a 4-year, so we're actually proposing a 4-year required graduation credit course that will be taken by every Punahou kid in the academy for all of 4 years. And yes, it rippled some feathers when we recommended that, but we have faith, and we think we're on the right track. We have the research to prove it. So this is kind of the summary of what we've said so far. So the CASEL framework is that research checklist. Put that as your homepage, the CASEL website. Just look at it every morning. And then for us, the guiding framework is that content, is the aims of a Punahou education. So our litmus test for are we on the right track is, are we tackling social responsibility both from a CASEL perspective and addressing it explicitly as part of what our school values. So it's kind of matching. So if you can find those two pieces, like CASEL exists, go back to your schools and find out, like, what are the things that we value? If we had to say 5 things that our graduates will leave us with, what are those things and why? And you need to know the why. And then for us, the bubble that probably should exist at the top is that sort of creating a new culture, but then it's the 4-year required courses and then our revamped advisory program. And we're super excited about that. And then don't take a picture of this next slide because we could get in trouble. But this is what our fantasy looks like, so we're on a 6-day schedule. So we go 7:30 to 3:30. And so there's no common lunch hour. And so we imagine a day where 11:30 to 1:30, so 2 hours for our AP heavy school would be like 2 hours every single day would be dedicated to social emotional learning. And we see it in a myriad of project-based ways, like doing service in the community. We had this fantasy one day of saying, like, what if in a 9th grade class, we have different hangout spots as every school does. We said, what if a 9th grade class adopted for its personal leadership that they would have Kuleana for the space, this tree that they hang out at. And then they could figure out like what kind of messages do they need, could they do so, they'd have to meet with the grounds crew, because of course we have a grounds crew, and they would meet with the grounds crew to say like, how hard is it to clean up? How many hours do you spend every day? So do some research on how much time it takes for them to clean up after the kids when they go home at the end of the day. They could do a survey of how much stuff gets lost, and then they could come up with some sort of a campaign to care for their space. So that would be like a 9th grade baby thing. And then as they went through 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, they could be doing ever more complicated versions of that out into the community and potentially beyond Oahu. So we kind of see it morphing that way. But again, can't have that picture. That's our fantasy. Come back in 3 years. We'll let you know how we did. And then, of course, we live in the real world. So this is, everybody agrees with us, but everybody's super busy. Money is limited even at our school. Change is super scary, especially if your brand at our school was I'm the AP blank teacher, to suddenly say that being a good person matters as much. The Synapse school I mentioned already, the head of school when he met with us said, in his mind, S.E.L. is more important than S.A.T. And I said, I will credit you every time I use it, but I'm going to totally use it. And then people are super busy. We've got, I get there around 6 because I don't like driving in traffic. And I'm never the first person on campus. There are people at school, and our first class is at 7:30. There are people there way before me. And when I leave at the end of the day, there are people that are there way after me. And so adding this to their plates, because we're at this point not able to take anything off, has been a challenge. But Bennett's going to share with you some of the things that we have done so far.
So we kind of view advisory as another prong to develop social, emotional, and ethical learning. We see advisory as a place where students can be welcome, known, and safe. But previously, advisory teachers didn't view that as at all. They viewed it as a break in their schedule where they would check in their kids and see you later. So this year, we actually had an almost forced choice. How do you want to connect with kids? You can connect with kids through the library, through a study hall teacher, or you can be chosen as an advisory teacher, where you can follow these kids for the next 4 years and create an environment almost like a neighborhood where you guys are getting to know each other. And so at least there was some choice in there that we knew that advisory teachers wanted to be there, which was important. And so each cycle, out of the six days in each cycle, there's one day that there's advisory extended. So they have chapel, they have assembly, and advisory extended is 55 minutes of staying within your advisory group. They used to look at it as doing time, like, oh my God, we're staying here, what are we doing? I don't even want to look at you. And so coming in with the freshmen, it's much easier to change than with the juniors and seniors. I have juniors, and when I said, okay, we're going to stay, they almost had a revolt. And I said, hey guys.
What you did.
Oh, well, yeah. So having that standard set that there's intention to it, there's a purpose to it, right? And it's known for the teacher and the students that we are going to spend this time getting to know each other and connecting and making this a place where you do want to be, right? And they're part of that as well, having some autonomy of what activities they want to do, what things they want to focus on. We also had teachers with reassigned time to help support basically the activities and the curriculum.
And their math teachers.
Oh, and their math teachers. And one of the best things that we did was assign basically four different teachers to a hui. So they would get together, and a leader of each hui would basically talk about the different challenges and successes that they were facing, and then they would share out through amongst the grade. And that's been really great. We also wanted to start the advisory experience very strong. So we traditionally have a welcoming camp that we invite all the freshmen to And they're sorted through each camp by availability, and sometimes kind of random or whatever sport they play. But this year, we intentionally created the teams by advisories. And we invited the advisory teachers to come. So they started out, before they even came into the classroom, with this common experience, which is an overnight experience up at Pupukia, which is a bunch of fun, team building, getting to know each other, games. But they all started on the same common ground. And once they were in the classrooms, it was the connection, the feedback that we got for the students was great. Even so much so that our sophomores and juniors, well, I mean, it's juniors so much, but our sophomores are saying like, hey, what about us? You guys are like giving us the short end of the stick. We want to spend time together. I'm like, are you sure you do? Like, but there's been an overwhelming positive response that they do want this. They do want the change. They do want to connect with kids outside their cliques. They do want to connect with kids that they wouldn't talk to. And they're asking for us to provide us spaces and opportunities to make that happen. Because as you know, high school is, I don't know, it's not the easiest place to be to say, hey, how are you doing? You know, I wanted to connect with you. And not normally people don't do that. They do this. Right? And so we were trying to battle that. And just having communication throughout. Whatever theme or whatever lesson we're doing in our 9th grade guidance program, which is basically a life skills and welcome to the academy, this is what it's going to look like. We're spreading that to the advisory teachers so they can kind of repeat or address some of those things that we've been working on. So far, so good. However, like most said, change is hard. Some of our colleagues have been there for a very long time. 20, 30 years is a norm when you go to these anniversary things. I mean, I'm on my 4th year. I'm like, am I going to get there? So we took a hard look at ourselves in terms of the courses we were offering and the processes that we had. And are they promoting what we want? Are in the direction of what we want? And some of them were not. So we ended some courses and some processes that we were doing. And that has been difficult. But the underlying theme was that all of our colleagues and all of our counselors and all the people that we work with really want the best for kids and care for kids a lot. And we're just doing it in a different way. And that was really, that brought us together and connected us. One of the biggest things that we were lucky to get as we did our research across the nation, we found that schools that had a space for students to take care, to self-care, and to find a moment of silence for reflection or to gather themselves for a big game or to come down from a big game or a big test or a big performance was really effective. So we were lucky enough to create a space that we affectionately call the S.E.L, for student support and wellness. It's in the middle of campus across from the deans with aromatherapy and fountains or whatnot, and it's housed by counselors and caring teachers. And what happens is that you come in, you check in on an iPad, they have the ruler descriptions of how you're feeling, and there's an option of if you want to see a counselor or not. And if they do, we're there. If not, that's not a problem. After 15 minutes, we'll check in with the student and see how they're doing. And if everything's great, they go. If they need more support, then we'll go into one of the conversation rooms. It's a tech-free and a conversation-free space, which is something that we're trying to norm, because some kids come in there and start eating or go on their phone. We're like, no, that's not what the space is used for. And once we talk to them about it, they get it. So we were really, I mean, stoked is the word, to be honest. I mean, we're so lucky to get this place. And so far, over 2 months, we've had about 460 kids check in for various things, either tired or anxious or sad or whatnot, but not always seeing a counselor, which is great, right? We're not trying to create dependence. We're trying to create awareness and the ritual of self-care. We're trying to reduce that stigma, and having it in the middle of campus and having it in a place where colleagues and teachers and students come passing in has been awesome. And then we prefer,
Just a quick question
yeah.
about it. Talking to counselors, is there an opportunity for peers to talk to one another as well as there is, or is that not?
Repeat the question, Christopher Mike.
Oh, is there an opportunity for peers to meet with each other? Yes, so they would talk with us, and then we would reserve the conversation room with them. If they needed support from us, yes. We do that, yeah.
How similar and or how different is your four-year required course going to be from your redesign advisory program? I mean, are they different curriculum?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question was, how similar or different is the four-year curriculum going to be to the redesigned advisory program? I think eventually, in that little graphic that I showed you, eventually we see them moving seamlessly, but that sort of speaks directly to the constraints that we all have. We're literally begging and cajoling certain teachers to stick with their kids when they go to chapel, not go grab lunch. So there's a big cultural step that has to go from, okay, I teach math, actually math is unkind because the math teachers are awesome, but I teach a subject, and so I'm going to walk my kids to chapel because I'm required to, and then the chapel's right by the faculty dining room, so I'm going to settle them into chapel, and then I've got a 45-minute free period to have a salad and chat with my friends. It would be the biggest concern that our colleagues have expressed when we were appointed was that they would suddenly be required to teach advisory. And so our thinking, and it's supported by the research, is use the advisory structure now to create the safe space to build the community so that every kid has a friend on campus. And then figure out, because as I probably glossed over a bit, but the structure of our SEEL program is going to be, we're using competency-based assessment, which is new for our school, and we're using the mastery learning model to build the courses. So we're actually running two parallel tracks, but what we're imagining is that we're going to take sort of our all-star advisory teachers and invite them to teach in the SEEL program as a first step. And then when we do that, again, Kathleen, this is confidential. Okay. So what we're imagining is if we take the all-star advisory teachers and invite them to teach in the SEEL program, and give them reassigned time for that it'll be pretty clear that we're hoping a couple messages will be evident that this is something the school values, and if you want to step up and learn how and travel with us on this important journey, we will find the space in your academic day to make it worthwhile. But at the moment, is it overstating to say we would have mutiny? I would say if we tried to impose a curriculum right now, there would be mutiny.
Yeah, but I think the biggest difference is that the SEEL curriculum would be teaching the skill sets, as advisory would be a place for the kids to be welcomed and safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, and even in the end, so that right now they're two separate but traveling in parallel paths. As we're designing it though, and we're testing some of this right now with the 9th grade class, is the skills that we're building, as Bennett says in the SEEL, we want to have, our first step is going to see advisory as the place to practice those skills and to test them out. And so that will probably be how the bridge is built eventually, is that if eventually we go to this 6-day, 2-hour block that's all community, that it'll be skill building practice, it'll be projects for kids to sort of, and I think the barriers, I mean, chapel's probably always going to be sacred, sorry, that's kind of funny, but I think everything else is eventually going to be fluid. But one of the other constraints is we've been told we have to work within the existing advisory blocks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, you were going to do the activity. Sorry. Okay, so we're super excited about the job that we've been asked to do. If you've ever met our principals, we have this Spitfire, Dr. Paris Priory Kim is K8, and then her partner is a fiery redhead from Vermont who is a competitive downhill skier. And the two of them together, Dr. Emily McCarran and Dr. Paris Priory, are the most inspirational women I've ever met. And I haven't actually met Michelle Obama, but she's close. They're like her. They're like her, but from here. And they have moved mountains to support our work, and we're new department heads. Neither of us have ever been in this level of leadership role before. I make many more mistakes than Bennett does, but it's been, their support of us has been unfailing because they know we're doing collectively good work for the kids. So Bennett's going to help us with a wrap-up that we hope might help, because we have a long way to go as well, but we're thinking we could maybe spend a couple minutes helping you sort of frame what you might do next for your schools.
Yeah, I think just a little bit clear. So the SEEL program, what we did is take a look at the castle wheel and took a look at those skills and how they lined up with the aims of a Punahou education. And we kind of teased out the different competencies of what does a global citizen or global perspective look like. what does empathy and compassion look like, and how does that fit in terms of self-awareness and social awareness? And those are the things that we're designing. But for your school and your organization, could you imagine, what do you imagine the 3 to 5 S.E.E.L skills that you'd like your graduates to develop? What do you think are the most important? And what courses or 1 or 2 places could you be able to incorporate this type of skill building? And write down a first couple of steps you need to take to initiate this. A lot of the training that we went to and all of these different types of things that we went to really ended with something like this. Okay, you have all this information. Now there's an expectation to actually make a plan and do something. And I found that really useful because by the time I came back to campus, I had something in hand that I could work on and that I could contribute to a discussion or to a movement. So if you'd like to take the time to do that, that would be awesome.
And we'll take, well, and actually, the one thing in that specific steps oftentimes is like, who's that first person, that either influential administrator or that influential teacher who could help you turn the corner?
Yeah, and who could you share it with?
And who could you share it with at your school? And so we did some training, we did a lot of training together with other people from our school, and then we did some separately, but almost everyone we went to said, okay, before you get on the plane to go back to Hawaii, can you send an email and set up an appointment with blank in order to tease out your first kind of next steps? And it's so funny that those 3 simple steps make it so much more actionable. You know, because the minute you get back, you've got like 400 email and you've got laundry to do and you're tired because you're flown to Hawaii. Thanks for your good attention today and for sharing these, kind of helping us think through it. Writing a presentation is a very good way to make sure you know what you're, to make sure you're on the same page as your partner. So thanks very much, and we will totally take questions now if you have any.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.